Tejasvinavati tamastu mavid vishavai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May Brahman protect us, may he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om, peace, peace, peace. And good evening. We are reading from the complete works of Swami Ramakrishnananda, one of the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, who did a lot of the preliminary work in the south part of India. And we're reading a lecture entitled Arguments Against Atheism. And so Atma will read for us, starting, if you're following along, it's on page 311 at the bottom.
But do they not tell of a place called heaven where Indra reigns, and is that not full of bliss perennial? Inquired he. How can you account for that? Do you believe that your scriptures simply imagine some false impossibilities? Why no, those who share in the bliss of heaven, they remember their past miseries in the world. And because they have the previous experiences of great miseries, they can supremely enjoy the pleasures of heaven by comparing them with their past miserable lives on the earth. Such was my reply, at which he turned the course of our talk by saying, very well, let us return to our old question. You said God is the combination of all what resists our desires, and by so doing leads us. It's a sort of anti-power as regards ourselves, which is ever free and therefore almighty and always resisting without being resisted. Is that power any intelligence? Can it feel as we do? To this my answer was, look into the workings of that energy. Are they not orderly and regular? Can order and regularity come out of non-intelligence? Look at the flowers, how tastefully they are made. Look at the beauties of nature, how sweetly they are spread before you for your enjoyment. Can they proceed from a being that is neither feeling nor taste? Look at your own self. You're nothing but what that power is making you. It is gradually lifting you up from the lowly basement of ignorance to the exalted pinnacle of knowledge. It's making you more and more unselfish, more and more noble, more and more intelligent, more and more pious as you grow more and more old. If you dive deep into the workings of this power, you will gradually see that it is really bringing you up with 1,000 times more care and love than what your parents can command.
Yes, you know, when you look at nature, if you look at the physical world, you can see how incredibly finely tuned it is, where the balance of the positive and negative charges is exactly equal, and the gravity and electricity and magnetism and inertia all work in harmony and to an incredible degree, how the balance of all the electrons and protons and neutrons have this incredible dance of energy in all the different chemical elements. And then you look at nature and you wonder at how a particular flower can only be pollinated by a particular type of beetle or a particular type of moth. It's quite incredible how intricately interconnected all the different parts of Mother Nature are, between the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, the fungus kingdom. The fungus acts like a huge underground internet connecting all the trees, and how the trees and plants can actually communicate with each other. And they can send pheromones out through the air, and they're picked up by their neighbors, and they can communicate as to where the sources of water are, whether there's danger of being eaten by a predator or an insect. So all of these incredible things happen in this magnificent dance of nature that is the Divine Mother's drama. So he's definitely right on that score. All right, let's continue.
This he asked, how can that be, since this power resists my desire, whereas my parents love me and readily give me whatever I ask of them? At this I questioned him in return, do not your parents too resist your desires, tend towards evil? Do not your parents too resist your desires when your desires tend towards evil? The senses are the causes of our desire. Unless those desires be checked, we will be led hither and thither by the senses, which are always misleading. For they confirm us in our errors of seeing as permanent what are impermanent. So you see that by checking desires, the errors are checked. Is that not a great benefit? By timely resistance from the power, we are brought to a proper sense of our real position.
Yes, you wonder what kind of parents he had if he just fulfilled all his desires. First of all, that's not possible. Nobody has infinite ability to fulfill any desire somebody might come up with. And secondly, fulfilling all desires isn't desirable from the standpoint of bringing somebody up. You don't want to bring somebody up thinking that they can just have whatever they want. And then they have to think of other people. They have to think of how all these things affect the other people around them and whether this really is beneficial to them in the long run. Are you going to just give your kid all the ice cream and candy he wants and not mention the fact that his teeth are going to rot and then he's going to have to go to the dentist and suffer the pain and torture of being in the dentist chairs for hours? I don't think so. Or just let them overeat to the point where they're so overweight that they have all sorts of health problems. This is just totally unrealistic. So he's definitely not, the questioner is not thinking very clearly here. All right.
But, replied he, the scriptures attribute to the power we are speaking of, which you call God, many beautiful male and female forms. How can you account for that? As far as I have understood you, that power can have no such form, or if it has any, it is the whole universe. The whole universe is the body of that infinite power. It cannot be called either male or female, but males and females in all things proceed from it. Well, I see you've hit upon the universal form of the Lord, I replied. But did I not tell you that that power is 1,000 times more loving than your parents, and is the repository of all sorts of powers, and that there is none to resist it? This being the case, and it being the more natural, the more easy, and more attractive for us, we know it is our own dearest, most beautiful, most loving, and the nearest of all friends and relations in the universe. We naturally look upon it as such, and it becomes the most loving he or she, at least for our sake. For what is impossible for an almighty, all-merciful, and all-loving power. So you see, he, henceforth we should not call him it, cannot be altogether unknown and unknowable. His very kind and kind-loving and kind nature disproves this. And those spotless, pure children of nature, the sages and rishis of yore, ardently desired to see their unseen father, their unseen mother, who was supplying them with all their little wants, was keeping them from all unforeseen dangers, was decorating their sylvan abodes with exquisitely beautiful and divinely fragrant flowers, was entertaining them daily with the melodies poured forth from the throats of nature's sweet choristers, the gaudily dressed and clear-voiced merry denizens of the air that father or that mother could not conceal himself or herself longer, and appeared before them as Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, the Sarasvati, Lakshmi, Durga. So you see, our scriptures are nothing but a record of divine graces poured forth at different times on different fortunate and pure-hearted individuals. These men are the authors of our scriptures. They know something of God, and what they know they recorded for the benefit of the posterity.
Yes, and of course, ultimately, you simply end up with the idea that, in some sense, Maya is inscrutable. We can't understand why the universe exists and why it works the way it does, but we can appreciate that it works with incredible intricacy and complexity and beauty, and yet we know that that beauty is a poor reflection of God. That's a statement that Vivekananda makes, that all of nature's beauty is a poor reflection of God. So we want to remember that it is a reflection of God, but it's not a terribly accurate one, that it does tend to mislead us at times. So we can appreciate the beauty but not be misled by the beauty, and realize that the beauty is always balanced by the terrible. So we have the pleasant and the terrible forms coming together, and that both are manifestations of the divine, but they are hidden. The divinity is masked or hidden by a veil and not being truly represented, because Maya is inscrutable. That's its nature. Okay, let's go on.
The friend replied, well, it may be your God is really loving and kind. In that case, I cannot deny that, although I have much doubt about his loving kindness. But to return, you just now said, the desires lead men to error. So according to you, the giving up desire is therefore the best means to escape from the grip of error. To this I answered, yes. Moreover, if you have no desire, you will not experience any resistance from the hands of God. A permanent peace will be established between your God and yourself. Your interest will be blended with that of God. Your ideas will be his ideas and vice versa. You will lose your own self in his self as a river loses itself in the ocean. But, added I, why don't you believe that he is all loving and all merciful? Because, said he, if he be all merciful, he cannot be almighty. For since he is all merciful, how can he see one of his creatures suffer? That's against his nature. The moment he sees one of his children suffering, he will at once believe him, for he is almighty. But unfortunately, my dear sir, that is not the case, as we daily experience in the world.
Well, you know, when you look at the mystics and the saints and the sages that have experienced the higher reality, and even people that have just had, say, lucid dreams or memories of past lives and memories of being in between lives. Perhaps they've gone through regression, perhaps they simply remember it spontaneously. All those people report pretty much the same thing, that you look at things from a completely different perspective, and somehow it all kind of makes sense. It's something that we can't understand when we're in this worldly life and the human experience in the realm of Maya, but from a higher perspective, it all makes sense. And Vivekananda used to say that this divine play can be very humorous when you look at it from that standpoint, even though it doesn't seem humorous at the time, that it seems like a lot of it is torture. But then also he says that he learned more from the difficult times than he did from the good times. And so it does seem to have something to do with experiencing things in both pleasurable and miserable conditions in order to learn and grow. That seems to be the general consensus of the best way we can understand it from this perspective. But of course, as Sri Ramakrishna often would remind us, that all of these questions that seem difficult to answer, when you get to that transcendent state, the questions disappear. And so you can't answer them because the questions aren't there anymore. So let's go on and continue with Sri Ramakrishnananda's reply here.
Why, I replied, I do not experience any such thing in the world. A man once got a big ulcer on his back, which unless operated would surely end in his death. The man was helpless and poor, but a kind doctor who lived next door came to see him of his own accord without asking any fee and made the necessary operation. Oh, the agony which the man was in at the time of the operation is beyond all description. The fond grandmother of the man began to rail at the doctor for his inhumanity. Did you join with the old lady to call him inhuman, although the man got perfectly cured after a few days? So although the doctor was apparently cruel, yet he was very merciful. Similarly, the apparently cruel God is nothing but merciful. But perhaps you will say a doctor having but limited power cannot help the poor man in a better way, but as regards God, the case is altogether different with him. He could cure him if he simply willed, without giving him so much trouble, for by hypothesis, he is almighty. To this my answer is that he could, no doubt, cure him in no time, as well as he could have given him no ulcer at all. And since he had purposely given that to him, he did not like to cure him so soon, in order to remind him of his past misconducts, and thus to make him more careful about his future conduct.
There again, this idea of learning lessons and learning what to do and what not to do. And when you think of nature again, you realize that all of nature is designed, everything has to eat. And so everything is competing for survival. And even in the plant world, you end up with trees competing for light and water, and the plants underneath having to adapt to lower light or growing someplace else. So even in the plant kingdom, there's competition and things getting shaded out and dying because they don't get the light, or perhaps invasive roots from another plant grabbing all the nutrients in the water, and they get choked out, weeds choking them out, and so forth. And then, of course, the plants or the animals have to eat the plants, and other animals eat those animals, and it's just a huge cycle. And you can't call that pleasant from the standpoint of the thing that's getting eaten. We know that even plants seem to respond to these things and send out distress signals if they're being eaten. So we can't say that it's just we can all become vegetarians and all the problems are solved. There's still suffering on the part of the plants. So the whole world is a divine mystery at that, and yet it seems that we're here to experience that, and that's the way the world is set up for us to learn all sorts of mysterious lessons. All right, we just have one little paragraph in this left.
At this time, the sun has lifted himself up a considerable way above the horizon, and has been sending over us some of his lustrous rays through the branches of the trees to remind us that we should go home and take upon ourselves the shares of our daily duties. So thus we departed, and I never met the young man again.
All right, so that ends this particular chapter on the arguments against atheism. And we can begin chapter 10 now, called Morality as the Factor in the Progress of Humanity. So does the morality of the people in a society measure its progress? All right, let's read his first paragraph here.
All living beings are endowed with organs of diverse sorts and of various dimensions by means of which they enjoy life. From the tiniest animalcule, which cannot be discerned without the aid of a microscope, to the biggest animals such as the elephant, the rhinoceros, and all possess senses by which they can know, feel, and enjoy this world, which holds out various attractions for every one of them. But of all these organs, the most perfect and complicated organs are those of men. The organs of other animals are far more simple, and therefore far less capable of knowing and enjoying this world. A world whose existence may be said to depend simply upon the senses, the real self-existent world being beyond the ken of all living beings. Animals with the simplest organs do not possess as many senses as those with more complex organs. These latter are generally known to possess 5 senses, so that they can see, hear, smell, touch, and taste by means of them. In animals lower than man, one or other of these 5 senses predominates over the rest. The elephants we hear have a keen sense of touch. They have a great love for a soft, warm touch, so much so that they peril their own safety, being enamored by the soft touch of the she-elephant scent. To decoy them to a stronghold where once entering, they lose all their liberty for the rest of their lives. The elephants are known to be very intelligent among the lower animals, but all their intelligence avails them nothing when they get infatuated with the soft and warm touch of the she-elephant.
Well, this paragraph goes on a long way, so I'll interject here a little bit. Of course, now we know, which he probably did not have the benefit of knowing, that the sense organs of some insects and animals have abilities that we don't have. Some animals and insects have more than 3 cones, for example. So their diversity of color experience is far greater than what we can experience. Some animals hear in ranges that we can't hear. They can hear in ranges that are higher or lower than we can. And so their experience of sound is much greater. But that would still be covered to some extent in his saying that they have a specialty for one sense over the others, possibly. So, but it is interesting that I'm not sure that it would be fair to say that they are simpler organs of perception. Now, of course, when you get down to really lower forms like earthworms and shellfish and things like that, then of course, yes, their perceptions of things are much reduced. They don't have eyes like we do. They don't have ears like we do. But just looking at mammals or perhaps birds and so forth, most of them have all 5 of these senses, and some of them are very highly developed. But perhaps his observation that they have one that's much more overly developed at the expense of the others might still be true. He's going to make a point here. This is definitely, he's playing into this idea of renunciation of the sense pleasures. And so he's going to give some specific examples here of various organisms that actually bring themselves to peril because of their sense organs. So that's going to be his pitch here. All right, let's continue.
The bees are known to have great fondness for smell, and they lose their lives in the lotus, which they enter to enjoy its sweet fragrance that generates in them a lethargic forgetfulness and makes them altogether overlook the fact the petals are closing around them, the close of the day, and thus would cause them to be buried alive. The insects are known to be very fond of bright forms. They actually sacrifice their lives in the bright, beautiful, and flickering flames, being enamored of its glory. The fish sacrifice their lives for taste. The angler sits upon the bank of the brook with his rod and line in his hand. The dissembling bait allures the foolish fry. It cannot resist the temptation of tasting what promises to be an exceptionally good dish, and is at once hooked and pulled out of its element to be thrust into the bag and to die. The hunter plays upon his flute and sings a very nice and alluring song. The deer hard by is enamored of the melody. The least idea of imminent danger is no place in her. The poisoned and cruel dart enters her heart from the heartless bow of the hunter, and she dies a victim to music. The elephant, the bee, the insect, the fish, and the deer represent each of the 5 senses in its highly developed state, and we've seen how their very senses become the causes of their death. When one sense predominates in any of the lower animals, it becomes the cause of its ruin. And all these senses in their highly developed state constitute the human organism. And is it wonderful then that a human being surrounded on all sides by such mortal enemies has every chance of losing his life every moment of his existence.
Yeah, so again, I'm not sure exactly how much we can generalize his idea here, but we can take his the general gist of what he's saying, and that yes, the sense organs can lead us astray, and so that's basically what he's trying to say. All right, so we can continue here.
Life seems to be worth living only for the enjoyments, which it holds out to all, and these enjoyments are seated in the senses. The sensuous pleasures, therefore, are the only attractions for every living being to attach him to this world. And alas, these very senses also are the causes of his ruin. Because these senses are the only means of our enjoyments, therefore all living beings are slaves to them. Pleasure is the one thing which we love, and pain is what we want to avoid. Our life is made up of a constant struggle to avoid pain and court pleasure. Pleasure is the only thing which almost all people worship. These pleasures are all seated in the senses, and is it not therefore natural for them to worship these senses, but for which there can be no pleasure? Hence all living beings are devoted adorers of the senses, so much so that their devotion to them has led them to identify themselves with them. The more pleasure we get from a certain thing, the more our love and attraction for that thing. We've seen that in the lower animals, one or other of the five senses is highly developed, and therefore they are fondly attached to that sense, so much so that they identify themselves with it. This identification is the cause of their attachment to the body. Hence it is that none of them ever likes to be separated from that body, give up its life. For self is the one thing which is universally loved, and that self being identified with the body gets to be universally loved.
Yeah, so of course, what we understand is that these bodies and minds of ours and those of other organisms are all designed to help us survive. It's a genetic necessity. The genes make sure that they can survive somehow, and the ones that don't survive don't get passed on. And so the whole evolutionary idea is that the organisms are selected for that somehow manage to pick the good things in the world and avoid the dangerous things. But then the predators develop ways of going around the way that they select things, so they can sort of outsmart their prey and themselves get fed. So then the preyed upon have to get a little smarter and find ways of outsmarting the predators, and vice versa. So it just goes back and forth and back and forth. And again, the predators weed out the ones that didn't learn the lessons well, and the ones that did learn the lessons managed to survive and pass their genes on. And so this is the way the whole natural world works. And this works in the plant kingdom too. The plants that sprout up the fastest get the light, and they shade out the other ones. So all of these things work to weed out the weaker individuals in the genetic pool, and they might be the stronger ones in some other environment, perhaps where the water is less or the light is less. They might be the survivors, and the other ones might not be the survivors. So having this diversity in the gene pool allows different organisms to survive in different kinds of environments. And that's the way this divine play goes on, with this incredible diversity. And then, of course, we have huge natural disasters that wipe out large percentages of the organisms, and then the whole process has to kind of start from ground zero again with many fewer organisms, and then the diversity then multiplies again through evolution. And so it's the Divine Mother has a great fun in her play, you could say. All right, let's read the next paragraph.
From what has been already said, it must be clear that the love of life or an intense desire for the preservation of the body is simply a collection of the senses. All of the five senses are highly developed in a human being, and every one of them can bring to him a certain amount of pleasure. Hence, his attachment to them, or his body, should be more than that of the lower animals, whose senses are not so highly developed and therefore less capable of enjoyment. Moreover, man is endowed with a reasoning power by means of which he can distinguish what is right and what is wrong, what is pleasurable and what is painful, and also how to get the greatest amount of pleasure with the least amount of exertion, whereas the lower animals are simply guided by their instincts, which are always very limited, and as such can only give them a very limited idea of pleasure and enjoyment.
No, I'm not sure this is going to hold up under current scrutiny, but he's trying to make a point, and that's fine. But I think Vivekananda says that no human can enjoy a meal with such gusto as a dog can enjoy his meal, and that kind of thing. And I think you could come up with other examples where clearly animals are experiencing a great amount of pleasure or enjoyment out of something that we would perhaps enjoy a little bit, but not very much. Think of how a cat delights in chasing a little red dot from a laser pointer and just has great fun, or chasing something that moves. It wouldn't do anything for us. We're not that interested in chasing red dots. But the cat is greatly enamored by that. So all of these things are perhaps subject to a debate here. Anyway, let's continue.
All the enjoyments of the world are open to man. He can mix and combine them in an infinite number of different ways and can thus create for himself an innumerable number of artificial pleasures in addition to what nature already has given him. And this makes him cling to life more fondly and ardently than all other animals.
Well, we can certainly see that. We have all this artificial intelligence, and we have the virtual reality now, and we've got so many channels on the TV, it takes forever to find what you want to look at. By the time you found it, your time is up and it's time to go to bed. More books than you could possibly read in a lifetime available in libraries and on Kindle, and articles and so forth. It's just completely overwhelming. We are completely overwhelmed with things that we're supposed to be able to enjoy. You can now have, I mean, when I was a kid, after all, that's just one lifetime. Within one lifetime, we've gone from a time when you got apricots when apricots were ripe in May and June, and you got peaches in June, July, and August, and you got oranges in particular seasons. No, we get them any old season we want. You can get them year-round. Doesn't matter. We import them from Chile or some other country. We store them in refrigerators. So the amount of enjoyment we can have any kind of food we want. We can have Indian food, Mexican food, Thai food, Chinese food, any French food, Italian food. You've got so many choices now. It's completely overwhelming. So we have inundated ourselves with a variety of sense pleasures. Okay, let's go on.
The things of enjoyment being vast and immense, and enjoyment being the one passion of his mind, the arch-animal man has no time to employ his mind otherwise than in an incessant search after pleasures, all of which are located in the senses. Man, the slave of pleasures, is therefore a slave to the senses. And can a slave have any time to think about himself? All his time being occupied in obeying the order of his master? And again, what sort of slavery is it that man labors under? Let us study the matter carefully.
Yeah, so this is again, he's really making a good point that you have to be the master of your sense organs and not have your sense organs be the master over you. Well, it doesn't mean you can never enjoy anything, but it means that you must be very discriminating and realize that you have to be the master. Well, we learn that just in very mundane things like dieting. We understand that we can't eat ice cream and cake all day long. That is not good for you. And we learn we have to eat a balanced diet. And we learn that we can't stay up all night watching TV and because we won't be able to go to work the next day. So we've learned to be discriminating in these things. And people that are not doing well, they either lose their jobs, they get all sorts of diseases and so forth, and they pay the price for not learning these ways of being discriminative. And so this is really the basic teaching here. All right, let's go on.
We have seen that the slave has no time to think about his own affairs, all his time being occupied in the thought of his master's affairs, even when that master is one. But suppose that the slave belongs to two masters, and thus has to serve both of them at the same time, and both of them are simultaneously ordering him on two different errands. What would the slave do? It will be impossible for him to obey both the mandates at the same time. He will first obey the mandate of the master, who is more demanding, importunate, uncompromising, and tyrannical than the other, and finish his work. Then he will be able to carry out the desire of the less importunate master, who is not the less uncompromising and tyrannical for that. In this case, the slave will have no time to sleep even. Now again, if the slave has to serve three masters, his difficulty becomes much greater. One master wants him to go to the north, another master will simultaneously want him to go to the south, and a third will want him to go to the west. And what's he to do under such circumstances? He will have to first carry out the order of the most important and demanding master. He will have to do the biddings of only one. Do you think he will have rest after that? The first master has a fresh errand ready for him. When he does that, the second master is ready with another. In this way, such a slave will get no idea of rest at all. He will have to be naturally restless. The slave who has to serve 4 or 5 masters will not know when and what to do for all his masters. He will have to be an idiot, a machine in the hands of his masters, who will use him just as a group of young boys deal with a football, sending it in all directions by kicking it with their feet.
Yes, it reminds me of, say, going to a theme park, and you want to go on all the rides, and you want to experience all the restaurants. Well, it's impossible. First of all, you have to stand in lines for half an hour or an hour, and you just have to settle for the fact that you're only going to see a few things, and that you're only going to sample 1 or 2 of the eating facilities. And the more time you spend eating, the less time you have to go on the rides. So life is like that. You have to make choices, and you have to be discriminating, and you have to be satisfied with what you can do and realize that that's fine. Otherwise, you're just always miserable thinking about all the things you didn't do. And so that's a big trap that we get into. All right, I think we have time for one more giant paragraph. The next one goes on for, I don't even think we have time for this whole paragraph. We'll have to stop in the middle of this paragraph. This is an unbelievable paragraph. It goes on for 2.5 pages. All right, we'll do what we can. Okay.
And such is the case with man and his relation to the senses. Says Jesus, no man can serve 2 masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. But alas, is man not only to serve 2 masters, but more than double the number of masters who are always importunate, demanding, uncompromising, and tyrannical. A man is a slave to his senses. The tongue always wants him to bring good food. The eye always wants him to have beautiful things around him. The ear wants to hear sweet music and soft, flattering words. The nose always wants sweet-smelling flowers and perfumeries, and goading and impulsive passions are always demanding of him the fulfillment of their desires. What can be the state of a man's mind when it is simultaneously lorded over by so many masters who are always hard to please? He's sure to be kicked all over the world, even as a football. As a football in the playground is never at rest, so a human mind in the playground of the world is never at rest. Such being the case, it may be thought that human life, instead of being a very pleasant and enviable thing, is really one which is not in any way desirable. That it is better for a man to commit suicide than to try to live his life out after what has been said, although such an inference may look logical and correct. It is not actually so, for as we've shown before, the nature of the mind is to search and struggle after pleasure, and it finds a peculiar pleasure in such struggles. Hence it is that, however miserable in this world a man may be, he never likes to lose his life, for he always expects that the circumstances will change, and good days may again dawn on him, and that again he may be regaled with pleasures on all sides. This hope feeds the fire of his love of life. His heart hankering after sensual pleasures has made him blind to his abjectly slavish condition. He finds a peculiar pleasure in such slavery. Such is the characteristics of almost all human beings, as well as of all the lower animals. Man, the arch animal, is so far nothing better than animal. Only his field and capacity for enjoyment are much greater than those of the lower animals. Because the enjoyments are greater here, his attachment to the earth and to his body is greater also. He is preeminently worldly. He's come down so low, has identified himself with the world so fully, that he thinks the world to be his real home, and he's going to live here permanently. He earns money, purchases lands, builds houses and gardens, spans bridges, invents engines to make locomotion easy. In short, makes this world as much habitable and comfortable as possible. Science has come to its aid for this purpose, and as success, however little, ever increases to an enormous degree, some hope to expect to bring out even immortality from the ever mysterious infinite storehouse of nature, where he hopes to find whatever he likes. Man, the ruler and master of this beautiful earth with the trees, rivers, and mountains, as well as all the lower animals, therefore tries to beautify and adorn it according to his taste, even as a lover wants to adorn his sweet and naturally beautiful lady love according to his taste to enhance her beauty all the more. He's spending all his energies, both physical and mental, for this purpose alone. He's living continually in an atmosphere of poetry, forgetting the prosaic side of the question altogether, forgetting that his companionship with her is not eternal but ephemeral, not real but imaginary, not productive of any good but the source of all misery. In his mad love of the world, he has forgotten the real state of affairs. What sane man is here amongst you that will like to buy lands, erect buildings, dig wells and ponds in a place where he is destined to live for one night? For example, in a caravan on his way home.
Yeah, all right, we can pause there. We'll just have to remember where we're picking up. And yes, and of course, life is full of compromises and balancing. Many times there have been quite a few movies and episodes of sitcoms where the family has to balance work and family. If you work all the time to support your family, you don't get any time to be with your family. So that doesn't seem very sensible. So you have to settle for less so that you can have some time to spend with your family and be happy with fewer things. Things really don't make us happy. They just kind of take up our time. I often wonder what the wealthy people do with homes with 50 rooms in it. you wouldn't have time to even visit each room. What are you going to do with them? It just all seems so silly. Or people that have 2 or 3 homes, they have one on this coast and one on that coast. Then they have a vacation home. And then they have to hire all sorts of people to take care of all these homes. And they never get to visit them. It just all seems kind of silly after a while. So we have to learn that just having a lot of things doesn't bring us happiness. We have to learn to balance things and be happy with what we can reasonably manage in life, and not try to take on too much, not try to take on too many activities. And you know, suppose you're an actor, well, you can't try to be in 3 movies at once. Your rehearsal schedules are going to conflict with each other. You're going to be too tired. You're not going to enjoy it. And of course, there are many instances where actors are pushed by studios to the point of exhaustion and taking drugs to stay awake and taking drugs to go to sleep, and then getting addicted and ruining their entire life, trying to do too many things at once. So we all have to balance our lives. We can't take on 3 majors in college and expect to come out with sanity. We're just going to be running ourselves ragged. So balance is the key. And of course, leaving the moderate life. Buddha, of course, always said that, the middle way, not going into extremes of things. So with that note, we will close, and I'll just remind you that we have our Vivekananda Puja coming up on Sunday. The actual puja is actually tomorrow. I mean, his actual birth date by the Bengali calendar would be tomorrow. And I believe our Santa Barbara Center is doing the puja then. We're doing it on Sunday. And we have the tradition of serving a breakfast. And that's in memory of Sister Lalita serving Swami Vivekananda in the South Pasadena house. When Swami Vivekananda stayed at the place in South Pasadena for 6 weeks, Sister Lalita used to serve him breakfast. And so when they started the center here, she asked if they could have the breakfast like she used to serve Swami Vivekananda. So it's a very touching and personal connection with Swami Vivekananda, realizing how really close we are to the source here, and how Swami Vivekananda's presence in South Pasadena really started this center. All right, we'll close with our chant. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Om, peace, peace, peace.
Is it my imagination, or is the air conditioner on?
Well, we try to keep the fan on because of the...
Is it getting